Hello and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Wednesday, February 21st, 2018, and this is episode 49. My name is Carol and I am known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry. The show notes for this and every episode can be found on the blog and also in the episode thread in the Ravelry group. So if you don't find the answer you're looking for there, by all means drop me a line on Ravelry or leave a comment on YouTube and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Come by, join our Ravelry group. Introduce yourself in the welcome thread or my favorite, show me what you're making in the what are you making thread. Doesn't have to be knitting, any craft will do. I'm always interested to see what all of you are up to. This week's episode is going to include what I'm wearing, what I am calling Refinished projects, a couple of works in progress, a little bit about what I'm reading. I'll tell you about what I've been doing this week, and I also have a very special segment at the end where I am going to talk about curling. I've had a viewer ask me if I would explain the game, so I'm going to give my Reader's Digest version at the end. So if you're interested, you can stick around for that. So settle in with something hot or cold, depending on where you live, and let's get at it. It's actually cold here. We've had another kind of blast of winter, and it actually is very, very lightly snowing right now. So I've got a nice hot cup of tea. I am drinking Candy Cane Crush by David's Tea, which is kind of a peppermint tea. I quite often will make it like a latte, but this time I've just made it like normal and put a little splash of milk in there. So it's good either way. So first things first, what am I wearing? This is Miranda. It's a worsted weight short sleeve sweater by Jose Paquin or Paquin, depending on how she pronounces her name. I knit it back in November 2013 out of Malabriga worsted in the Va colorway, which is greens and blues. Just stand up and get an idea. It features this cable panel that runs down the front and it ends in this kangaroo pocket and ribbing on the bottom. So this is a great layering piece for a day like this where it's chilly outside, but a full length sleeve sweater is too warm for inside the house. I have shown this on the podcast before, so I won't get into any more detail than that. But feel free to check out my project page and you'll see I did a few adjustments and have more details about the sweater there if you're interested. So the first refinish project I am going to talk about is Gabbro by Carol Feller. And you've heard quite a bit about this lately. I knit this back in the fall of 2016 and have never really worn it much because I found the shaped hemline that it just didn't really flatter me. I'm going to put a couple pictures here so you can see what I'm talking about as far as the style of the sweater goes. So last week I took out the shaped hemline and I proceeded to reknit a more traditional hemline, and I incorporated the diamond lace pattern that's featured elsewhere in the sweater into the bottom of the sweater. Now the color is showing up much more light gray than it is in real life. In real life it's a little bit darker and has a lot of blue tones to it. That same diamond pattern runs down the side. And in the original pattern, this lace pattern is increased, is made wider in the area that is shaped along this right-hand side. So I felt like I needed or wanted to incorporate it into the bottom of the sweater somehow, and I'm really happy with, I think it works really well. I am going to hold it up so you can hopefully see the whole thing. I am very happy with how this turned out. It was a nuisance to do because I kept mixing up the lace pattern, and I don't know how many times I'd get so far in and then realize it was wrong and then rip it out and do it over. But it was worth it. I think I've definitely now have a more wearable sweater for me. I'm quite happy with how it turned out. So yeah, there you go. I sure wish this color would pick up better. It's such a lovely shade, almost a denim-y blue gray, and it really doesn't do it justice on the screen, or at least not how I see it in the camera. So maybe when it's processed, the video will show it off better. But so there you go, number one. So I can put that sweater away, but actually take it out and wear it from time to time now. So I have another sweater that I have reworked to make it more to my taste. And actually, it's another Carol Feller sweater. And as I said before, it's not a slight on Carol Feller. She does beautiful design work. It's just that these two sweaters, as designed, just didn't suit me. See if you can see. I don't have a color photo. This is Lewin. And as you can see, it has a hemline that slopes up in the front and then down in the back. And this is achieved using short row shaping across from basically more or less each side, and then it goes around the back so that the back it becomes longer in curves, and the front sort of stays straight. Let's see if there's another picture here that might show that better. There's a picture of just the hemline that gives you an idea. Yeah, so again, I just didn't care for how this looked on me, and so I wasn't wearing it. So, again, color's not the greatest. It's actually a really deep red. I guess I should tell you about the yarn. It is Bloomin' Fiber Arts Single Silky Targhee in the True Blood Red colorway, and it's definitely a darker blue red. So what I did is I took the sweater back to this point, so just a couple of inches under the armhole, and I re-knit again, a traditional shaped hem, and I did waist shaping in the front on either side, about 25% of the way in from each side, and then on the back I did the shaping about a third of the way in from each side. And that is something that I learned from, what is her name? Who does the Fit to Flatter and Knit to Flatter series. Blanking on her name, I'll put it here. But that's how she recommends that waist shaping be done. It works especially well for me because I am not very curvy. And so sometimes a sweater that's shaped right along the side seams is just too curvy, and then the hem kind of sits out funny on me. So this method works really well for me. So yeah, all I did was carry this, it's called a dot ridge, whoops. Sorry, not doing very well, dot ridge pattern it's called. I just carried it right down to the bottom and did a garter stitch edge to match the sleeves with an I-cord bind off. And once again, have turned this into a much more flattering and wearable sweater for myself. So I do not have pictures of either of these finished project pictures. If the light's okay and if I get the time, I will take some and put them into the podcast here If not, keep an eye on my project pages if you're interested. But yeah, I'm feeling very good about turning both of these sweaters into something much more wearable and flattering, which is related because they're flattering, they're more wearable. So, works in progress. I had some car time this week, so I worked on my sister's socks that I'm knitting out of Opal Under Twassers 2106. Rain on a rainy day, based on that picture. Here's the color number. And I added in complementary heels in this West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply in the blue raspberry colorway, which is 333. And so I've actually just got past the heels on both socks. So I'm knitting them concurrently, as you can see. So this one's a few rows further along. So I'm going to just slide this down the needle so I can turn it sideways. There we go. So you can see I'm knitting these from the toe up, which I don't do that often, but in this case I really wanted to start with the turquoise so that it would match the heel. And also my sister has longer, wider feet than I do, and I really wanted to make sure that I had enough yarn. And so with a short row heel, as long as you know where to insert the heel, it's actually not much different than doing a top down because it doesn't have a heel flap and gusset. So yeah, anyway, those are coming along nicely. So now that the heel's done, they've become a work on anytime, anywhere type of project. So that's handy to have one of those on the go at all times. And finally, oh, I didn't bring the pattern in, but that's okay. I did, as I'd hoped, cast on my Winter Rose Socks by Helen Stewart. This is the first pattern in the Handmade Sock Society, and the yarn I'm using is this set of yarn from Alpaca Yarn Company. It is Pacapeds HT, and I think HT stands for heels toes. So I love these colors. I think they're very reminiscent of some of the photographs of winter roses or hellebores that I have seen. Here's the label if you're interested. And this is the eggplant colorway, which is number 627. So as you can see, I began the ribbing with the main color yarn. I considered doing the ribbing, the heels, and the toes in the lighter colorway, but I decided I really liked the way it looked less broken up with the ribbing in the same colorway. So I'm happy with that decision. So then I will, instead of doing a heel flap and gusset like the pattern calls for, I am going to do a short row heel and then a contrasting toe in this lighter colorway. So I think it'd be really pretty. I am enjoying these so far, except for one row has a knit 3 together that's repeated around, and I'm finding that kind of fiddly and a bit hard on my hands. It's a 5-row repeat. The rest is great. It's just that knit 3 together is really just causing me a bit of a problem, but the finished results are worth it, so I'll persevere. But yeah, I'm happy to finally get a start on those socks. So that's it for what I've been working on. Now that I've finished those two, or refinished those two sweaters, I'm planning to pick up my Dusty Road again and work on the second sleeve, and then that'll be a third sweater that I can call done, you know, in the beginning of the year. So that feels good. I have finished Murder in the Mews, or also called Dead Man's Mirror by Agatha Christie. I actually finished it yesterday. I had to go take care of some business at a government agency, and you rarely get served right away in them. So sure enough, I had to wait for a while. So I read most of the third story in here, and then later on that afternoon finished up that story, and last night the last story was quite short, and so I read the last story just before bed last night, which actually it surprised me. So I always like that, and not so much in a really well, I guess a little bit far-fetched way, because it's Agatha Christie, but I literally finished it and went, oh, well, that one got me. Anyway, enjoyed that. I haven't been doing a lot of reading lately. I'm not sure what's next up in the reading queue, but I'll let you know what it is when it is. So this week we did have some more winter weather. Saturday morning we woke up to snow. It snowed all morning, and then we went into Vancouver that afternoon. My husband had an opportunity through work to go and see a Vancouver Canucks game and then stay overnight in a hotel. So I think there was about 20 of us. So we thankfully the roads were fine going in, even though it had been raining here or snowing here all morning. The roads were fine, and the snow kind of ended not too far into Vancouver. The game was great. Well, we went for dinner first at like a brew pub, and then we were staying very close to where we were eating and very close to Rogers Arena, which is where I always want to call it Jam Place, because that's what it used to be called and nicknamed the Garage, but it's Rogers Arena now. Where the Canucks play. So it was Chinese New Year, so they began the game beforehand with some dancers doing the dragon, in their dragon costumes, doing dragon dance. And they, throughout the game, they were located at various places throughout the arena where you could see them. So I've got a picture here of that, and then the players, they introduced the players and they came out and skated among them. And then Canucks got off to a great start. They were playing the Boston Bruins, which are kind of our rivals going back to playoffs of 2011. So Canucks scored 2 minutes into the game, and by the end of the first period it was 4-0. And the end score was 6-1 Canucks. So it was a great game to be at. The last two games we went to, we lost. So it was nice to come out of there having won. And then most of the group ended up back at the pub at our hotel afterwards, and just have a nice evening. And then the next morning, so while we were in the bar after, we had walked back from the stadium, and it was raining very, very slightly. And then while we were in the pub, we kind of someone looked out the window and said, it's snowing out there, and sure enough it was. And then it got heavier and heavier. It was so pretty. But by the next morning, even though it had snowed quite heavily, again, the roads were clear. So, but the surrounding mountains were all snow covered. It looked really beautiful because it was sunny. So before we headed back home, my husband and I went for breakfast or brunch really, and then took a drive around Stanley Park, which is a beautiful park right on the water in Vancouver. And it's a place that we have spent many, many happy times. We went there on our first date. We got engaged there. We took our kids there when they were little fairly often because we lived closer to Vancouver at that time. And yeah, so whenever we're in Vancouver, we quite often, at the very least, will do the drive around around the park along the water. So it was very cold, even though it was sunny. It was quite windy and cold, so we didn't get out and walk at all. But I did, in one place, take this picture. This is the Lionsgate Bridge, and the mountains that you can see in the background are the North Shore Mountains, and those particular peaks are called the Lions, which is the reference to Lionsgate. Last week I said I hadn't been watching any of the Olympic coverage, but that kind of changed over the weekend. We were in a few different bars and they had the Olympics on, and it kind of piqued our interest. So this week Cameron and I have been watching Olympics every night. I love that you can record it, fast forward through commercials, etc. So we watched the ice dance competition, and very proud our Canadians, Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer, won the gold medal in that. I have the women's short program recorded, but I haven't watched it yet, and I'm not sure when the long program is, but Cameron's less interested in that, so I'll check that out during the day when he's not here. But we have been watching the curling. Our Canadian women got off to a rough start, and then they picked themselves back up, but unfortunately they were defeated by Great Britain yesterday, which took them out of the semifinals and a chance at a medal. So it's kind of sad because the Canadian women have won a medal in every Olympics since curling became an Olympic sport, so we're kind of sad to see that happen. But to my UK friends there, good luck to your team. They are playing in the semifinals. And then the Canadian men, despite a couple of losses, have made their way to the semifinals, and they're going to be playing their next game against the United States, who beat them the other night. So to my US friends, may the best team win. Of course, I'm rooting for Canada. And then our women's hockey team, US and Canada, are meeting in that this evening. So again, may the best team win. So just trying to think, this week we're going to another hockey game this weekend, but this one's closer to home. It's our local team. And other than I curl tomorrow night. We had a bye last week, so I've missed a couple weeks. So I'm looking forward to actually getting back to curling myself. Especially watching it so much this week's got me really enthused for it. Other than that, not a lot going on. Expecting more snow this weekend, though. It's, as I said, lightly snowing out there now, and I think it's tomorrow night we're supposed to start getting more quantity, and Friday's supposed to be quite a bit of snow falling. So we'll see how that goes. Winter is definitely not over yet. We've had some beautiful sunny weather, but cold temperatures this weekend and cold wind. So yeah, spring's coming, but it's not here yet. So I think that's it for this week. I'm going to kind of clear some things away, grab my curling equipment, use it as props, and give just a brief overview of the game. So if you are interested, stick around for that. If not, goodbye. I will see you next week. So take care till then. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So as I mentioned, I had a viewer ask me if I would talk a little bit about curling. She's been watching it during the Olympics, and she said she's enjoying it, but she doesn't entirely understand what's going on, and asked if I would give a bit of an explanation. So I've been, this is just my 4th year curling, and I didn't follow it a lot before that. So in many ways I still feel like a rookie. And I'm certainly not qualified to tell you about the finer points of the game, especially when it comes to strategy. On the other hand, I do play, so I do understand the basics, and so I will try and explain those to you in as simple and concise a manner as possible. Now, I am discovering that that is not as easily said as done. Like any game, there are lots of moving parts and nuances, and also terminology that is specific to the game. So sometimes I'm finding that maybe I'm rambling too much or going in too many different directions. So I'm going to try this again and see if I can accomplish what I'm setting out to do. So bear with me. And if you have any more questions at the end, feel free to message me and I'll try and clear up a point. So basically, curling is a game that's played between 2 teams on what is called a sheet of ice. And at one end of the sheet, you have what's called the hack, which sort of looks like starting blocks that that runners would use when they're running a race. And at the other end of the sheet of ice is the house, which looks like a big bullseye painted underneath the ice. I should say more accurately that each sheet of ice has 2 hacks and 2 houses. But you start at one hack and throw down the ice towards one house. And then when you're finished with that end, you turn around and you throw from the hack at that end to the house at the opposite end of the ice. And the object of the game is for your team to get your rocks, as many of your rocks as possible, as close to the button or the center of the house as possible. There are 2 teams. I believe I said that. Each team has 4 players: the lead, the second, the third, and the skip. Each player throws 2 rocks per end. And an end is like an inning in baseball. It's once each player has thrown their 2 rocks, the end is over, and then the tallying for the score takes place. In a typical league game, we try and get 8 ends in. During the Olympics, each game consists of 10 ends. Now, sometimes at the end of 10 ends, the teams are tied, in which case extra ends are played until the tie is broken. In other cases, one team might be quite a ways ahead of another team, and mathematically or logistically, the other team is not going to catch up or not going to be able to win, and so the game is ended early. And that is the team that's behind, that's their decision to make. So before the game, the teams flip a coin to see who is going to have hammer. And hammer means that your team throws second, and that's an advantage. Again, like in baseball, when you have home team advantage and so you have last bats, it's an advantage to have the hammer in curling because you get to throw that last rock and have the last chance at scoring a point during that end. So basically, the game starts. The team that does not have hammer, their lead will throw the first rock. And the rock, if you've been watching, is this big, heavy granite round thing that has a handle on the top. And depending on where your rock is supposed to be thrown to, you either throw it clockwise or counterclockwise. and you hold it by the handle, you slide out, and then as you release it, you either release it turning the handle clockwise or turning the handle counterclockwise. And depending on which way you release it, that the rock will spin in that direction and curl either this way or that way towards where the rock is supposed to go. Now, the harder you throw a rock, the faster it goes, the less curl it has, the less it will curl from one side to the other. The slower you throw it, the opposite happens. It gets more curl, but it also doesn't travel as far. So a typical beginning to an end would be that the skip of the team that's throwing first will want to put a guard in front of the house. And that's a rock that sits a few feet, usually outside of the house, closer to the hack. And it will later be used to either guard rocks that are in the house or be used to tap up to affect the rocks that are in the house. So a typical game that we play is your first, the team that's up first will usually throw a guard, and then the team that throws second will usually try a draw, which is trying to throw the rock into the house, and you try and usually throw it behind the guard so that it is protected. You alternate who throws, so the team that does not have hammer will throw the first rock. The lead on the team that has hammer will throw the second. The team without hammer will throw the third. The team with hammer will throw the fourth rock. So your leads throw the first 4 rocks. Your seconds throw the next 4 rocks. Your thirds throw the next 4 rocks. And your skips throw the last rocks. After you throw your rock, you have two sweepers. So if you're the lead throwing a rock, the second and third are going to sweep for you. Sweeping you can sweep for 2 reasons. One reason is to make it the rock go faster, and the other reason is to hold the line that the rock is taking. So the ice that is used for curling is special. It is pebbled, which means they sprinkle water on top of it. So you have little beads of frozen ice on top of your flat ice. And the rocks skim along the top of these pebbles. So by sweeping, you take your sweep, and if you've watched on TV, you are sweeping very hard. It warms up and melts these little pebbles before the rock travels across them, and that gives your rock, as I say, more speed, but also gives it a line to follow as it travels to the house. So sometimes when you're watching, you'll hear them say weight only or line only, and that's the skip instructing their curlers that the line is really good. It's coming where I want it. But if it's not traveling fast enough, then sweep it. Or sometimes it will be, okay, that rock's going pretty fast, but we might need to guide it into where we want it. So then you would only sweep it to bring it where it has to be. So, when the skip, you'll notice that the skip will usually use her broom to point where she wants the rock to end up. And then she will hold her broom on the ice with her the head of the brush up. And that's what the curler, the person throwing the rock, is aiming at. So the skip might want the rock to end up here, but the curler is going to aim at this broom and throw counterclockwise so that the rock will then travel and end up So that's what the skip uses the broom for. What you'll also notice is that definitely in competitive curling, the vast majority of curlers use their broom to balance on as they come out of the hack, and then they throw the rock with their other hand. You also can use something called a crutch. I hate that word because it makes it sound like you are an invalid, but this is a crutch. This is what I use. So I would hold this to balance myself as I slide out of the hack and then throw my rock with my right hand. I learned, as I said, I've only been curling not even 4 years, and I tried to curl with a broom as for balance and found it really difficult. So this is just something that gives me more balance, makes me more able to curl. In order to slide out of the hack, you need to have a smooth surface on the foot that you, try to think. You push, you know when you do something and you have to try and picture it in your mind? So this is my left foot, so I slide on my left foot. So there's like a Teflon or something, kind of smooth surface, so that my foot will slide as I push out from the hack. But then when I am just sweeping or walking on the ice, I have what's called a gripper that goes over that, that slippery surface so that I don't slip on the ice. So you'll notice a lot of curlers almost look like they're skating along the ice, and that's because they don't have a gripper on and they can just kind of smoothly slide along. I don't trust myself to do that, other than after I throw my rock, I have to slide back to behind the hack to wait for my next turn to throw. Other than that, I always have grippers on my shoes. As far as some strategy goes, we were watching a game last night, and there was the team was trying to blank an end. Now, normally what you would want to do is get your rocks in close to the center, but really your strategy is you really prefer to count a minimum of 2 per inning. When you have hammer, that's the whole idea. Is if you have hammer, the idea is that you should be able to score that inning. It's not inning, it's an end. If you have hammer, the ideal is that you score that end and that you score a minimum of 2. And at this level, sometimes a team will prefer to score none and therefore have hammer the next end and the advantage over just scoring 1 point. And so if you're watching and they're talking about a team blanking an end or attempting to blank an end, that's what it's all about. They'd rather score nothing and keep hammer for the next end than to score 1 and give hammer back to the other team, who then has a chance to score 2. There is something you will may notice, a couple things too. There's something called the 4 rock rule, which is unless a rock is in the house, you are not allowed to hit that rock unless you hit it into the house. So sometimes what happens is a team will throw a guard, and then the next curler will throw their rock and accidentally hit the guard. And if it bumps that rock into the house, then that's okay. But if it takes that rock out, means removing it from play, or if it goes somewhere else, then the rock is replaced and the rock that bumped it is taken out of play. Something you'll notice too, there's something called the hog line, which is a line that is towards the house end of the ice, between the hack and the house, and you have to get your rock over that line. If you don't, it's called hogging it, and it's taken out of play. You also have to stay in within the house, there's I think it's called the end line, the back line. If you go past that, when you throw your rock, that rock goes out of play also. Trying to think any finer points that you might have seen and not understand what's going on. You may have heard reference to a stone or a rock being burned. And if your broom or your foot or anything comes in contact with either your rock, your team's rock as you're sweeping, for instance, or the other team's rock, that is considered a burned rock. And it's up to the player who accidentally touches it to speak up and say, I burned this rock. And then there are some options open to the skip on that team, whether that rock gets moved out of play or whether it's just left where it is. What often happens is as you are sweeping a rock down into the end, you might accidentally bump another rock with your foot. Sometimes it doesn't move at all, but you've touched it. In that case, usually the rock is just left in play. But if you hit a rock in such a way that it actually hits another rock or affects or moves into a more favorable position or something like that, then it's more likely that that rock is going to be removed. When you are scoring, once all the rocks have been thrown, you look at the rocks that are in the house, because those are the only rocks that count. And let's say you're using red rocks and yellow rocks. So if the red rock is closest to the center of the house, closest to the button, but the next closest rock is yellow, then red scores 1. If red has the first rock, the one rock closest, and then another rock closest, and then the next closest rock is a yellow, red would score 2. And all the rocks that are touching the house count, or I should say they don't count, they are potentially will count, even if they're only touching the outside of the house by a little bit. That's called a biter. So most often a team can expect to score like 1, 2, 3 rocks per end. 4 is a big end, a 5 or 6, and then sometimes, very, very rarely, a team will actually score an 8-ender, which means that all 8 of their rocks end up counting. But that's very, very rare. Most times you can expect to see from, I'd say, 1 to 3 rocks, usually 1 or 2 that count at the end of an end. So that's how it's being scored. So if you're looking at the house and they'll show it from overhead, it's the rocks that are closest to the button. And like I say, if the yellow's the red is the closest, but the yellow is the next closest, then that's only 1 point for red. On the other hand, if the 2 closest belong to red, and then the third one that's lying third is, and that's what the term is, you're lying 1 or you're lying 2, that means that you're closest to the button. If the yellow one is lying third shot, then 2 red will count. So I hope that makes sense. I was trying to think of terms that you might hear during a broadcast that might not make sense if you don't understand. So the rock that is closest to the middle of the button is called the shot rock. And that can change during the course of an end, depending on the play. And so when the course of play is out there, the skip can decide that they either want to put a guard, or they want to have you draw into the house, or you might be asked to do a takeout or a peel, is how I hear it referred to on TV all the time is peeling this rock. We always call it a takeout, but that is when you throw your rock hoping it's going to bang the opponent's rock out of the house and yours hopefully into position. And it's like the game of pool. It's all about angles, and so you're usually very specific about where you want to hit a rock, because depending on where you hit your opponent's rock and at what weight you throw it, you may be able to either take out more than one rock at a time because it'll cream off this one and then this one and get them both out. Or sometimes you're trying to hit a rock on this side, so then you will kind of bounce or slide into a favorable position in the house that your rock will not also be thrown out of the house. Because sometimes that happens. Sometimes on a takeout, you throw your rock and you get your opponent's rock out, but yours also goes out of the house. Other times you want your rock to stick, and that's when you will try and take out your opponent's rock and have your rock bounce in such a way that it stays in the house and hopefully in a favorable position. So I'm just going to take a real quick look at I have a glossary of curling terms, and I checked off a few that I thought might, I wanted to talk about. Oh, tee line. In the house, you'll hear them talk about the tee line. So, and I'll talk about the house a little bit. So the house, you'll see it has 3 sets of rings. It's the 4-foot rings, the 8-foot, and the 12-foot. And running midway horizontally through the house is what's called the tee line. And ideally, when you throw a rock into the house, ideally you don't want it to go past the tee line, because what happens is when it goes past the tee line, now you're that little bit further away from the button, and another team can come along and throw a rock that will freeze onto yours or land very close to yours, which means they're going to be that little bit closer to the tee line, which means they're the ones that are going to count. So what you try and achieve is to have your rocks closest to the tee line so that the rocks that come after from the other team will be further away from the button and will therefore not be shot rock. I hope that's not too much information. I'm going to include, I got this list of curling terms from, I don't have the address on it. It's like Canadian Curling Association website or something. So I will provide a link for that, and also just for the website in general. So, and I'll look and see if there's something else that I find that just gives an overview of the game for those of you who want to know more about it. I hope I haven't made it more confusing for you. Basically, get as many of your rocks as close to the button as possible. That's the aim of the game. So that's it. I'm going to go and have some lunch while I get this started uploading on my computer. And I know I've stopped and started the camera a number of times, so there's going to be some editing to do for sure this time. But I'll try and get it up by tonight. So hopefully this comes up Wednesday night. If not, it'll be Thursday morning. So have a great week. I will see you next week. Thank you for watching. Thanks for hanging in for this kind of crazy explanation. I hope it helps. So take care till next week, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.